Another response I've been given for morality under an atheistic worldview is a more Platonic idea of morals. Morality is a form, meaning it is just like beauty and piety. It merely exists and doesn't need to be coming from something. It's what's called a prescriptive law. The problem here comes in with the question, why should I obey it? If it is just naturally implied, with the way the universe is constituted, that murder is wrong, what reason do I have for not murdering? And even if morality is attractive, if I choose not to obey it in order to benefit myself, why should I consider acting otherwise? Someone who holds this view of morality will say that we ought to obey morality. This seems to imply that we owe it to morality to act upon it. It's very proper to consider certain paintings beautiful, but that does not mean I must feel this way towards the painting. You owe things to persons. You obey a person's laws. So if I don't owe this prescriptive law anything because it's not a person, and if I may become better off by ignoring this law, then we are right back at morality ultimately being subjective. And I can murder if it benefits me. If there is morality, then there needs to be something we have an obligation towards to obey morality. This obligation could not be applied to an abstract concept, but only towards a person. This person would have to exist outside of the realm which morality applies to. This very quickly starts looking like theism. The best response I've been given on this subject is something you're probably already writing in the response box while you watch. Consensus dictates what is moral. When humanity developed, they began to create laws in order to function better, and this improved their chance of survival. This led to ideas being considered right or wrong, which soon developed into moral codes like the Ten Commandments. Now, this seems like a good way of thinking, but I still see a flaw. This implies that we invented the moral codes, so it's up to us what's moral. If morality is up to us, and there's a disagreement, neither one of us is right or wrong, we both just have different opinions. Way back in the day, there were people who worshipped the god Moloch. You may have heard of this from the same name, Baal. What these people believed was that they should offer their firstborn son on the altar to Moloch, and then heat up the hands of the statue until they were burning hot, and the child would be burned to death on the altar. In this situation, the consensus said that burning your child alive is not only acceptable, but is the social norm, and you should actually do it. But even if I couldn't think of an example of the consensus of morality being deplorable, this idea that humanity dictates morality still leaves us with a subjective view of morality, which still leads to the conclusions I'm putting forth. Even if a whole nation of people agree that morality is one way, another whole nation could disagree and believe morality is another way. Because there is no moral standard, neither one is actually right, they just have different opinions. When this worldview is examined, things start to make a lot of sense. Hitler is way over here on this side. Why? Because he held a worldview that was completely natural and based on evolution. I know some will say that he was Catholic, but the fact remains that he was heavily influenced by atheistic philosophers like Nietzsche, and the way he lived was under this worldview, not a Catholic one. Just because he was labeled a Catholic doesn't mean he actually followed the beliefs. Rather, he followed a very naturalistic approach to the way the world works. So in this extreme atheistic worldview, murder is not morally wrong. We just need to focus on what will benefit our race. In his mind, Jews were weaker than everyone else, so if we eliminated them, it would cleanse our gene pool and progress humanity much faster. In his mind, under this worldview, what he did was not wrong. Hitler was completely consistent with his beliefs and actions. He practiced what he preached. If you hold that there is no God, you end up with subjective morality, and murder being wrong is just an opinion. While that doesn't mean you will become a murderer, it does mean that you cannot have a problem with the evils we recognize in this world because they are not actually evil. You need to ask yourself whether you believe that there is truth value to morality. If there is an actual truth to morality, then there is a truth standard, which would require something outside of the universe to set that standard, the one that created it. If there is no truth value to morality, then we decide, even if as a collective, what is moral or immoral. This would mean there is no truth to humanity saying, this is immoral or that is moral. Which goes back to my point that it's not a matter of one person being right and another wrong, but instead each just have their own opinion. If I disagree with the consensus of morality of the human race, as Hitler did, then I'm not actually wrong. I just disagree. My actions would not be immoral because there is no truth in that statement. The strong dominate the weak, and that's just the way it goes. Now, as I said, there are some people that still hold to atheism, even though they fully recognize that these are the implications of that worldview. What I would like to point out is that they come to these conclusions because they hold to atheism, not because they naturally see these conclusions. What I mean to say is this. You do not start off believing that murder being moral or not is just a matter of opinion. We all intrinsically know that murder is wrong. The only way you end up at that conclusion is if you hold to atheism and want to hold to it, no matter what conclusions may be drawn from it. You wholeheartedly want to believe that God does not exist. Even if it goes against what you know intrinsically and what is common sense. Reductio ad absurdum. Your argument, if fully applied, leads to a ridiculous conclusion, and you must be able to accept this conclusion in order to keep your view that God doesn't exist. What I'm putting forward is that humanity naturally realizes that certain things are evil, and that this natural inclination we have shows that there is some sort of moral standard to the universe that has been put in place by God. As I've been working on this argument, I've had a problem presented to me from both sides. Theists have told me that atheists won't care if there's no such thing as good and evil, and atheists have so much as told me that they agree that good and evil don't have truth value. However, this completely changes when the circumstances change. If your loved one commits suicide, or your child dies, your perspective changes. First of all, you realize that this isn't a good thing. It's not a natural thing. It's a bad thing. Even if your survival value doesn't go down, you still realize that this was bad. Secondly, in order to fully take an atheistic and evolutionary approach, you would then need to consider this loved one that passed away as being a weak part of your species, and that them dying was not only natural because of their weakness, but was actually a good thing because now their weakness won't pollute our genes and slow down the progression of evolution of humanity. This is a sickening idea, especially when you're going through a situation like this. I'm sure I've made a lot of people angry right now. Please show me where I made an error so that I can have a proper understanding of truth. Because really, that's what we're all trying to do in this kind of discussion, right?